You know how sometimes you look at a piece of art and just wonder, like, what was really going on with the artist then? What was their world like?
Yeah, what were they thinking? What were they dealing with?
Exactly. So today we're doing something a bit different, maybe. We're taking a real magnifying glass to just 1 year, 1985, in the life of this artist, Bob Camblin.
Hmm.
Trying to see if we can get a deeper feel for what made him tick creatively.
It's a great approach.
Yeah.
And we've got some really interesting stuff to work with, exhibition records, articles, and these quite intriguing quotes and notes from Camblin himself.
Right.
So the idea is to kind of sift through it all, pull out the key insights into his activities, his thinking, just during that specific year. It's a unique way to get under the skin of an artist's practice, I think.
Okay, so 1985. Well, right off the bat, it looks like Camblin was, well, he was a pretty busy guy.
Oh, definitely. 7 exhibitions listed for just 1 year. That says a lot about his engagement, particularly with the Houston art scene.
7. Wow. And they seem quite varied, too.
They do. You've got The New Nude at Midtown Art Center.
Hmm.
The title itself is interesting, right? Mentioning Courbet, placing his work in that longer art conversation.
Hmm. And then things like Self-Images, a solo show at Graham Gallery
Yeah,
that suggests different facets of his work being shown.
probably. You wonder what the thinking was behind showing those specific pieces at that particular time.
And then there's Fresh Paint, the Houston School. Now, this one feels significant. Big show. MFA Houston, travels to New York, Oklahoma City.
Yes, definitely a major one. And the catalog lists his painting the studio multiple times. Seems like that was an important piece for him then.
But what really jumps out from what you've shared is his contribution to that catalog, or maybe the lack of one.
Exactly. Everyone else provides a statement, the usual artist spiel. But Camblin, he writes, Wow of Sinus Baby, 1984, and signs it, Sincerely Anonymous.
Wow, of Sinus, what even this? It's certainly mysterious.
It really is. I mean, what's he doing there? Is it a joke? A statement against those kinds of statements?
Yeah.
Deliberately obtuse.
It makes you wonder. Especially because around the same time, there's this Baytown Sun article about Fresh Paint, calling him a pioneer artist for his landscapes.
Right, so he's being publicly identified and recognized for a specific genre.
But in this key catalog moment, he pulls back into anonymity with this, like, daddiest phrase. It's a contradiction, isn't it?
A fascinating one. And then Kay Larson's review in New York Magazine adds another piece. She talks about the show's huge range and specifically contrasts Camblin's wily-like realism with Melissa Miller's work.
Wily like realism.
Okay. So even without a statement, the work itself was making an impression, getting categorized. People were seeing something specific there.
It gives us a glimpse of how he was being seen outside Houston, at least by one critic.
Some of the other show titles, Propaganda 2
Yeah.
and Houston Drawing, he sort of hint he wasn't just doing landscapes or nudes, maybe.
Could be. Suggests a broader scope. But that Texas Vision show, opening late 85, seems really key too, mainly because of how widely it traveled.
Yeah, you mentioned that. Where did it go? All over Texas. Kerrville, Columbus, Abilene, Lufkin, Rockport, McAllen, Richmond, 7 places.
Okay, that's significant reach within the state.
Absolutely. And the piece he showed, Texas Springtime? Guess how it was signed?
Let me guess. Anonymous.
Anonymous artists. Plural this time. He's really leaning into it.
Doubling down. So his work is getting out there, part of this wave of interest in Texas artists, but he's still insisting on this anonymity.
Precisely. On his own terms. The catalog for that show, Texas Visions, a celebration of Texas artists, probably has more clues about how he fit into that scene or maybe how he didn't quite fit.
And it wasn't just, a personal thing he was doing. He actually got a grant for it.
Yes. In 1985, a Cultural Arts Council of Houston grant specifically for anonymous artists.
That's wild. So the establishment, or part of it anyway, was actually supporting this anonymous identity.
Think about that. Institutional support for not naming yourself. It says something about the Houston scene then, maybe. A certain openness? Or maybe just that his work was strong enough to stand entirely on its own.
Okay, so that's the public side, the exhibitions. But other things were happening too. He travels.
Yeah. Took a month off to go to Hawaii in July 1985.
A whole month. You have to wonder what impact that had. A break, new scenery.
Could be anything, right?
Uh-huh.
Maybe just a recharge. Or maybe new ideas, new influences. Travel often shakes things up for an artist. New light, different landscapes.
Yeah.
It filters in.
Definitely. And then there's that funny incident in September the Einstein lawyers.
Right, a letter from the Einstein Foundation's attorneys about him using Einstein's image. Apparently he thought it was pretty amusing.
And it didn't stop him.
Doesn't seem like it. Suggests a certain boldness, maybe a bit of playful rebellion against, intellectual property concerns and icons.
Especially since he actually did make work about Einstein around then.
Exactly. That series, Big Al and the Electric Age,
Mm.
prints, even an etching surrounded by red neon. So the legal warning didn't really deter the fascination.
What do you think drew him to Einstein? The science? The fame?
Hard to say for sure. Could be the icon status, the mythology around him, or maybe something about Einstein's ideas resonated with Camblin's own thoughts on, I don't know, perception or the universe.
And one more thing from 85, an older painting, Bascom Street Studio, gets used in an art education journal.
Yeah, illustrating an article called Is Regionalism Dead? In Texas Trends in Art Education.
So his work, even pieces from a few years earlier, is part of the conversation about broader art movements, about regionalism education.
It shows his relevance wasn't just about the brand new stuff. His work had entered that sort of academic discourse too.
So if you pull back and look at 1985, you see this artist who's really active, exhibiting everywhere, getting grants.
But at the same time, he's cultivating this very deliberate anonymity, engaging with art history, with contemporary stuff, even pop culture like Einstein, but always kind of resisting that standard artist persona.
Okay, so let's connect this to his own words. We have these quotes collected over time, but they might shed light on that 1985 mindset, especially this whole anonymity thing.
I think they do. The idea comes up repeatedly, like that quote, "Stay anonymous and you are free." It really sounds like a core principle, doesn't it? Not just a gimmick.
Yeah, freedom from something, presumably,
Yeah.
from expectation, from the market.
Maybe all of the above. He talks about resisting external pressures, the disposable nature of the art world. Anonymity seems like his strategy for navigating that, for keeping the focus on the work, maybe.
It connects to other ideas too, right? This interest in balance and paradox.
Definitely. Quotes like balancing and being for and against, or draw, teach, search, reveal, always framed in paradox. He seems really comfortable holding opposite ideas together.
Which you could almost see reflected in being both very publicly exhibited and yet personally anonymous. That's a paradox right there.
It is, and he quotes Alan Watts about feeling connected to everything in a quiet forest, suggesting this search for a deeper unity beneath the surface contradictions. Maybe the art was his way of exploring that balance.
He also thinks a lot about why make art at all, moving past art for art's sake to something more essential.
Mm-hmm. Art for life's sake, art for my sake, even art for survival's sake. It sounds deeply personal, almost necessary for him.
And then broadening it out with that Shinichi Suzuki quote, art exists for the human species. That's a huge idea.
It is, and it makes you wonder, could the anonymity be part of that? Trying to make the art belong to everyone, not just to Bob Camblin, removing the ego to connect to something bigger.
That's a compelling thought. It fits with his ideas about seeing versus just looking.
Right. One must learn not to look, but to see. And quoting Arthur Koestler, true creativity often starts where language ends. He's pointing towards experience, perception, things beyond easy explanation.
Things maybe an artist statement can't capture anyway.
Perhaps. Maybe that wow of Sené's was his way of saying, words failed, just look at the painting.
He also gives little hints about his process. Step off the train of thought, flow and think of what you were doing, not what you plan to do.
Yeah, very intuitive, very in-the-moment sounding. Trusting the process, and even valuing mistakes learned to fail. That suggests a real openness to experimentation, not being afraid to mess up.
And he wasn't shy about critiquing the art world either, talking about consumer art, the shift from contemplation to just shock or recognition.
It sounds like he felt a disconnect with some contemporary trends. He wanted art to be more contemplative, perhaps, less about instant gratification or brand names.
That idea about art becoming more participatory feels quite ahead of its time, too.
It does, especially
Right.
thinking about where art has gone since the 80s.
And then there are those lovely, almost poetic little observations. The cottonwood trees, the breeze.
3 cottonwood trees, dense cluster of new branches, now with them gone, look, or not a leaf moves, and yet we all feel the cool breeze.
Yeah, they show this incredible attentiveness, this really specific way of noticing the world. That has to feed the art.
Absolutely. That close observation, finding the profound in the everyday, and maybe even later works, like that Oxfording picture eye from the late 80s to the early 90s, carry these threads forward.
So wrapping up this deep dive into Camblin's 1985, It really paints a picture, doesn't it? A year packed with exhibitions, travel, that funny Einstein letter.
And this persistent, almost philosophical commitment to anonymity, alongside growing recognition. It's a complex mix.
We see him getting grants, his work traveling, being discussed academically, but he's actively pushing back against the conventional artist role.
Exactly. By zooming in on just this one year, using these different fragments, the catalogs, the quotes, the little biographical details, we get a much richer sense of his practice and his thinking than just looking at a painting in isolation might give us.
It really shows the value of this kind of focused exploration, for anyone wanting to get beyond the surface level.
It illuminates the context in a really tangible way.
And it leaves you thinking, doesn't it? For our listeners, always looking for that deeper understanding. What is the role of an artist's public identity versus their private philosophy? Does anonymity, like Camblin practiced, actually change how we experience the art itself? Could knowing less about the artist sometimes let us, see more in the work?
It's a great question to ponder. How much does the name, the persona, shape our view versus just the object itself? Camblin in 1985 certainly gives us a fascinating case study to think about.